That guitar riff you've been humming for decades? The song that defined your youth? There's a good chance it wasn't written by the band you think wrote it. Today, we're diving into 10 rock classics that fooled entire generations. These aren't obscure B-sides or forgotten demos. We're talking about songs that shaped rock and roll, songs you've heard 1,000 times, songs you probably sang along to without ever knowing their true origins. Number 10. Twist and Shout by the Beatles. When the Beatles burst onto the American scene, Twist and Shout became their calling card. That raw, energetic performance on The Ed Sullivan Show had teenagers screaming and parents covering their ears. John Lennon's gravelly vocals seemed to capture the very essence of rock rebellion. But rewind to 1961, 3 years before Beatlemania hit America. The Isley Brothers were already making audiences move to this exact same song. Their version had that distinctive call and response energy, that gospel-influenced fervor that would later influence countless rock acts. You know you got me going now. The song's journey began even earlier. Phil Medley and Burt Burns wrote it in 1961, and it was first recorded by The Top Notes, a group that barely registered on the charts. The Isleys took that basic framework and transformed it into something electric, something that made you want to get up and dance. When the Beatles recorded their version in 1963, they were already fans of the Isley Brothers' take. They'd been performing it in Hamburg and Liverpool clubs, watching crowds lose their minds to those infectious rhythms. Their recording session was legendary, done in one take because Lennon's voice was nearly shot from a day of intensive recording. The irony is beautiful. Here was an American song, transformed by Black American artists, then reimagined by British musicians, only to conquer America all over again. The Beatles never claimed to have written it, but in the minds of millions of fans, it became as synonymous with them as Yesterday or Hey Jude. Number 9. Hound Dog by Elvis Presley.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time.
Elvis Presley's Hound Dog is pure rock and roll mythology. That hip-swiveling, rebellious performance on The Milton Berle Show in 1956 scandalized parents and electrified teenagers. It was dangerous. It was new. It was Elvis.
Well, you ain't never gonna
Except it wasn't new at all. 3 years earlier, Big Mama Thornton had recorded the definitive version of the song. Her performance was raw power, a woman who wouldn't be pushed around, telling off a no-good man with the force of a locomotive. When she delivered those famous lines, you believed every word.
You ain't nothing but a hound.
Thornton's version hit number 1 on the R&B charts in 1953. She was already an established performer, known for her commanding stage presence and powerful voice. The song was written specifically for her by Jerry Leiber and Mike Stoller, two young white songwriters who understood the blues in ways that surprised everyone. Elvis heard the song and fell in love with it, but his version changed everything. Where Thornton's version was about female empowerment and putting a man in his place, Elvis's became something entirely different. A rock and roll showcase that was more about attitude than narrative. The transformation says something about the times. A black woman's declaration of independence became a white man's rock and roll statement. But Thornton's original remains the more powerful performance, a reminder that behind many of rock's greatest moments stood artists who never received their full due.
Well, you ain't never gonna
Number 8. Gloria by Them. Van Morrison's Gloria, with Them, became the template for garage rock rebellion. That simple, hypnotic chord progression and Morrison's passionate vocals inspired countless bands in dingy clubs across America and Britain. 3 chords, endless attitude.
And her name is G. Ow!
But the song belonged to Shadows of Night first, at least in terms of chart success. Their 1965 version climbed to number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100, introducing mainstream America to this infectious piece of rock and roll minimalism.
She make her feel alright.
The real story begins with Them's version, recorded in 1964. Van Morrison was barely 20, leading this ragged Belfast band through clubs and small venues. Their recording was raw, almost primitive, capturing something essential about rock and roll's rebellious spirit. Morrison wrote the song, drawing inspiration from the call and response traditions of gospel and blues. The lyrics were simple, almost childlike, but that simplicity was genius. The spelling out of the title became a chant that united audiences, a moment where everyone could participate in the rock and roll experience.
Well, she come around too.
The song's power lay in its accessibility. Any band with 3 chords and an amp could play Gloria, and thousands did. It became a rite of passage for garage bands everywhere, a song that proved you didn't need complex arrangements or sophisticated lyrics to move people. When Shadows of Night took it to the charts, they proved that sometimes the cover can eclipse the original in terms of reach, even when the original remains the more influential version. Number 7. I Fought the Law by the Bobby Fuller 4. The Bobby Fuller 4's I Fought the Law is pure 1960s rock and roll. That driving beat, those harmonies, that sense of teenage rebellion wrapped in a catchy 3-minute package. It hit the top 10 in 1966 and became an anthem for a generation that was starting to question authority. But the song's roots run deeper into rock's foundation. Sonny Curtis of the Crickets wrote it in 1959, and his original version had that distinctive Buddy Holly influence, clean, melodic, with just enough edge to keep it interesting. Curtis wrote the song about a real news story, about a man who robbed a bank to pay for his wife's medical bills. The chorus became legendary with its simple message about fighting authority and losing. It was simple, memorable, and spoke to something universal about the struggle between individual desire and social order. The Crickets version was solid, professional, everything you'd expect from Buddy Holly's backing band. But it didn't capture the public imagination the way the Bobby Fuller 4's version did 7 years later. Fuller's arrangement transformed the song. His production was fuller, more urgent, with a driving rhythm that made the original seem almost quaint by comparison. His vocals had a desperation that matched the lyrics perfectly. Tragically, Bobby Fuller died under mysterious circumstances just months after I Fought the Law became a hit. He was found dead in his car, and while it was ruled a suicide, many suspected foul play. The song became his memorial, ensuring that his version would be the one remembered by history. Number 6. House of the Rising Sun by The Animals. The Animals' House of the Rising Sun is haunting, mysterious, built around that unforgettable guitar arpeggio and Eric Burdon's soulful vocals. When it hit number 1 in 1964, it introduced the world to a different kind of rock and roll, darker, more complex, drawing from traditions that stretched back generations. The song's origins disappear into American folk history. Nobody knows who first sang about the House of the Rising Sun in New Orleans. Some versions featured a woman warning other women about a life of prostitution. Others told the story of a gambling man who lost everything. What we do know is that the song was already part of the folk repertoire when Leadbelly recorded his version in the 1940s. His performance was raw, authentic, carrying the weight of lived experience. Later, Bob Dylan recorded it for his debut album in 1962, keeping the folk tradition alive. Josh White, Woody Guthrie, Pete Seeger, all the giants of American folk music had their versions. Each brought something different to the story, but they all shared that sense of warning, of a life gone wrong, serving as a cautionary tale for others. The Animals heard Dylan's version and were captivated. but their arrangement was revolutionary. They electrified it, added that distinctive guitar pattern, and extended it to over 4 minutes, an eternity for radio in 1964. Eric Burdon's vocals transformed the narrator from a folk storyteller into someone living the tragedy in real time. His performance was so convincing that many people assumed he'd written the song himself. Number 5. Louie, Louie by the Kingsmen is the ultimate garage rock anthem. That muddy recording, those barely comprehensible vocals, that simple 3-chord progression that somehow contained the entire future of punk rock. When it hit the charts in 1963, it sparked a moral panic. Parents were convinced the lyrics were obscene, leading to FBI investigations and congressional hearings. The controversy was ridiculous because the song was perfectly innocent, just a sailor singing to a bartender about missing his girl back home. But Jack Ely's slurred vocals made it impossible to understand, and in that ambiguity, people heard whatever they wanted to hear. The real Louie Louie came from Richard Berry in 1957. His version was clear, professional, with obvious Caribbean influences. Berry wrote it as a simple calypso-style song, drawing inspiration from El Loco Cha-Cha by René Touzé. Berry's version was good, but it wasn't revolutionary. The Kingsmen's version was revolutionary by accident. They were a Portland garage band, barely competent, recording in a small studio with cheap equipment. Jack Ely had to strain to reach the microphone, which was hung too high, creating that distinctive slurred delivery. The recording should have been forgotten, but something magical happened instead. That lo-fi sound, that amateur energy, captured something essential about rock and roll that all the professional recordings missed. It was real, it was raw, and it inspired thousands of kids to pick up guitars and form their own bands. The FBI spent 2 years investigating those lyrics, trying to decode hidden obscenities that didn't exist. Meanwhile, the song was inspiring a generation of musicians who understood that technique mattered less than passion. Number 4. Black Magic Woman by Santana. Santana's Black Magic Woman is pure magic. That Latin guitar work, those hypnotic rhythms, Carlos Santana's soaring solos that seemed to channel something supernatural. When it appeared on Abraxas in 1970, it helped establish Santana as one of rock's most distinctive voices. Yes, don't turn your back on the babe. But the song's journey began in London with Fleetwood Mac. Peter Green wrote and recorded it in 1968, back when Fleetwood Mac was still a blues band, before they became the pop juggernaut of the 1970s. Green's version was pure British blues, clean, precise, with that distinctive sound he coaxed from his Gibson Les Paul. It was good blues, respectful of the tradition, but it didn't have the fire that would make Santana's version legendary. Santana took Green's composition and transformed it completely. They added Latin percussion, extended guitar solos, and a rhythm section that made the song breathe differently. Where Green's version was introspective, Santana's was explosive. Got a black magic woman. The transformation reflected Carlos Santana's unique musical vision. He was blending rock, blues, and Latin music in ways nobody had attempted before. Black Magic Woman became the perfect vehicle for that fusion, allowing him to showcase his guitar skills while paying homage to both his Mexican heritage and his blues influences. Peter Green was gracious about the cover, recognizing that Santana had taken his song to places he never could have imagined. The success of Santana's version helped introduce a new generation to Fleetwood Mac's early blues work, creating a bridge between two very different musical worlds. Number 3. Proud Mary by Creedence Clearwater, revivaled
Good job in the city.
John Fogerty's Proud Mary is quintessential CCR, that swampy sound, those evocative lyrics about riverboats and the Mississippi, delivered with Fogerty's distinctive vocals. When it hit the charts in 1969, it seemed to capture something essentially American, something tied to the country's river traditions and working-class spirit. But here's where it gets interesting. Ike and Tina Turner took that same song and made it their own in ways that were impossible to ignore. Their version, released just a year later, transformed Proud Mary from a nostalgic reflection into a powerhouse of soul and rock. Wait, this isn't quite a cover story in the traditional sense. Fogerty did write Proud Mary, and CCR's version came first. But what happened next illustrates something important about how songs can be completely reimagined. The Turners' version began with Tina's famous spoken introduction about doing songs nice and easy, then nice and rough. What followed was a performance that took Fogerty's River Reverie and turned it into an explosion of energy and passion. The Turners' arrangement was revolutionary. They slowed it down, then sped it up, added gospel influences and R&B rhythms that weren't in the original. Tina's vocals were a force of nature, transforming the narrator from a casual observer into someone living the river life with every fiber of their being.
After a good job in the city.
Both versions became classics, proving that great songs can support multiple interpretations. Fogerty's original captured the mystique of American river culture. The Turners' version captured the power and energy that culture represented.
Bet you're gonna find some people who live.
Number 2. All Along the Watchtower by Jimi Hendrix.
Some kind of way out of here.
Bob Dylan wrote All Along the Watchtower in 1967, and his original version was typically Dylan, acoustic, mysterious, with lyrics that seemed to contain hidden meanings about confusion, searching, and impending change. Then Jimi Hendrix got hold of it. Hendrix's version, released in 1968, took Dylan's folk meditation and turned it into a rock apocalypse. That iconic guitar work, those layers of sound building to an almost unbearable intensity. It was like hearing the song's true form revealed for the first time.
I was getting lazy. Hey!
Dylan himself recognized what Hendrix had accomplished. He later said that he preferred Hendrix's version to his own, and began performing the song in concert using Hendrix's arrangement rather than his original folk version. The transformation was complete and permanent. When people think of All Along the Watchtower, they hear Hendrix's guitar, not Dylan's harmonica. The cover had become more famous than the original, more influential, more essential to rock history. Hendrix's version captured something about the late 1960s that Dylan's folk approach couldn't quite reach: the electric guitars, the driving rhythm, the sense of urgency. It all matched the turbulent times perfectly. The song became an anthem for a generation living through war, social upheaval, and cultural revolution. What makes this transformation even more remarkable is that both versions are masterpieces. Dylan's original is a perfect piece of folk poetry. Hendrix's version is a perfect piece of psychedelic rock. Together, they demonstrate how great art can inspire other great art. Number 1. Hurt by Johnny Cash.
What have I become?
Johnny Cash's version of Hurt is one of the most powerful recordings in American music. That weathered voice, singing about pain and regret over sparse instrumentation, created something that felt like a final statement from one of country music's greatest voices.
But I'll remember everything.
The song originally belonged to Nine Inch Nails. Trent Reznor wrote it in 1994 for The Downward Spiral, an industrial rock album exploring themes of self-destruction and despair. In its original context, Hurt was the sound of a young man wrestling with his demons. When Cash recorded his version in 2002, he was in his 70s. dealing with illness and the recent death of his wife June. His interpretation transformed the song from a young man's angst into an old man's reflection on a life fully lived.
Try to kill it all away.
The music video, directed by Mark Romanek, showed Cash in his later years, surrounded by the artifacts of his long career. The House of Cash Museum, shuttered and decaying, served as a metaphor for mortality and the passage of time.
Right here.
Reznor was initially uncertain about Cash covering his song, but when he heard the results, he was moved to tears. He later said that the song no longer belonged to him, that Cash had made it his own so completely that the original seemed like a cover version.
Feelings disappear.
Cash's Hurt became his swan song, a final statement that demonstrated his ability to find truth in any material, regardless of its origin. It bridged generations, introducing Cash to younger listeners, while showing older fans that he remained vital and relevant until the very end.
One I know goes away.
These songs remind us that music is a living thing, constantly evolving, being reinterpreted and transformed by each generation of artists. The covers we've explored today didn't just copy their originals, they reimagined them, found new meanings, connected with different audiences. Sometimes a cover becomes so iconic that it eclipses the original. Sometimes it creates a dialogue between different musical traditions. And sometimes, as with Johnny Cash and Hurt, it becomes something entirely new, while honoring what came before. The next time you hear one of these classics on the radio, remember their hidden histories. Behind every familiar song might be another story, another artist, another moment when music crossed boundaries and found new life. Music has always been about borrowing, transforming, and making something your own. These 10 songs prove that the best covers don't just imitate, they illuminate, revealing new facets of familiar gems and reminding us why certain songs endure across decades and generations. If you enjoyed this journey through rock's hidden history, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about the music that shaped our lives. And let us know in the comments, which of these covers surprised you the most? What other rock classics do you suspect might have hidden origins? Keep listening, keep discovering, and remember, there's always another story behind the song.